After several months of worldwide panic and desperation following the outbreak of COVID-19, the vaccines are here at last. All of a sudden, things are somehow looking up again. And in spite of the widespread destruction already visited on the global economy by the pandemic, the prospects at this point are not considered as gloomy as they were not so long ago. Joining us now from London to have a look at these prospects for recovery is Dr. Andrew Nevin, partner and chief economist at PWCNigeria, Nigeria. Welcome to the program, Dr. Nevin. Good to have you again.
Good morning. It's always great to be with you.
Good morning. Thank you. Well, this morning we were discussing with Michael Wilson, our business analyst from London, about the pandemic treaty that has been signed by over 20 world leaders. And he's talking about international cooperation, global solidarity, designing an international pandemic architecture to aid recovery and to help disadvantaged countries. But China is not part of it. They didn't sign the letter. The US is not part of it. You would like to have your comments on global solidarity, global cooperation, and how that can address the challenge of the inequities that we have seen, the vaccine nationalism that we have seen, and the other challenges with regard to the global pandemic.
Well, I think it's we should commend the leaders that signed it. I mean, it's obvious if you think about it, even if you're not a health professional, that if the pandemic is somewhere, it could be everywhere. And we have all the new variants that are emerging out of Brazil, out of the UK, out of South Africa. So it's a constant threat. I mean, the fact that we've had this vaccine nationalism emerge, particularly here in Europe and the UK in the last few weeks, is really unfortunate. But I guess I have to say, while I'm optimistic we'll come out of this, I'm not optimistic that we'll have a global pandemic response for this pandemic. I think that this architecture really might make a difference to the next pandemic. So I would really encourage it. But you need everyone to be a part of it. And of course, the other thing to say is just, there's always in Nigeria and parts of Africa, we suffer disproportionately for things that are not caused in Nigeria. This is another example. I mean, people are trying to get vaccinated in Nigeria. We don't have enough vaccine, then it's an issue. So, but at least I will commend the step in the right direction by Chancellor Angela Merkel and by the Prime Minister of the UK and by the President of France and the other signatories.
What's your take on the debt service suspension initiative that's going on at the moment? Should it be extended? What should the terms be?
You mean for highly indebted countries,
yes,
less developed countries? I always think that this issue should be on the table to help the highly indebted countries, but I don't put Nigeria as part of this. I mean, our situation is quite different for a number of reasons. One, our debt level is quite low by GDP standards. Two, we have lots of assets that are available for that. Three, we have a low tax take and the potential to increase the tax take. So I know there's been concern in Nigeria about it. I mean, we'll say what we always say, that the debt level is perfectly sustainable. And as long as we take on debt to help do things that are productive and grow the economy in a GDP sense, we'll be absolutely fine. I mean, you look at, as I said, we were the ones, PWC, who put out the paper on debt assets. And you can see that's a term that the Minister of Finance and others in the government use, and we're starting to mobilize those debt assets. So, for example, the marginal fields, the latest round of auctions showed, I think, $500 million US dollars of receipts for that. I mean, those sorts of assets, as they get turned from debt assets to live assets, it drives up GDP. It brings money to the coffers of the federal government. So I'm not concerned for Nigeria about the debt position. That's not to say there are not other countries in Africa that this is really urgent, but I don't think it's our most pressing issue.
Right. A lot of people are touting self-organizing, the self-organizing strength of Nigeria to be able to bring us out of this economic quagmire. And great people doing great things in silos, that are keeping the country together as regards entrepreneurship and the likes. I know you're working on a project as regards that. Tell me, as a result of that, how we can get out of COVID-19 with the ingenuity of a lot of Nigerians.
Well, I think like a lot of people who come to the country, when I first came more than a decade ago, you have a view of the country that's not really accurate. And, I really feel like now I've spent enough time in the country in the last few years kind of having a better sense of how the economy and the society really works. And we're trying to look below the surface of it. And, what's extraordinary about Nigeria? Many things, but to begin with, we only have this 6% tax take, 6% of GDP as tax take, which of course means that the government can't provide health care. It can't, and we were just discussing health care, for example, in the context of His Excellency the Presidency, can't provide education, it can't provide security, it can't provide power, it can't provide infrastructure. So what happens in the country? I mean, those things, they're not perfect. We have a long way to go. But many things happen in the country that are very positive. Well, in a sense, Nigerians are individually their own government, their own states, the public sector, and then collectively they get together to solve many of these problems. And I think that this is something that, Rufai, you and I are working on with some others to go deeper in this and start to celebrate this. Because if you think about it for a minute, particularly out of the pandemic, if you have a kind of centralized top-down system, it doesn't show the resiliency, it doesn't show the creativity, and I don't think it's really ultimately, is connected to the local needs. So we really want to encourage kind of going deeper into the self-organizing Nigeria concept. There are lots of examples that we're starting to cite. Just one I'll mention is something called 1 Million Teachers, which goes beyond Nigeria, but is about upskilling 1 million teachers across Africa. You would typically think that public education, primary education, is a public sector thing, but in fact, this is private individuals. Halima and Hakeem, who are actually doing this in conjunction with a Canadian university, and their lead chairman of the whole thing is His Royal Highness Muhammad Sanusi II, and they're just stepping up to do this, and they're having an incredible impact. But we go all around the country in Nigeria, we see more and more examples in every part of the nation about this self-organizing concept. So we want to bring it to the fore because ultimately, we'd like to put it out to the world. I think that if you ask people outside of Nigeria about the way Nigerian society is organized, one, they have very little knowledge, and two, to the extent they're prepared to express an opinion, they express a negative opinion. But I and the others working on this, including yourself, have come to the conclusion this is completely wrong. In fact, we have a model of social organization that's extremely powerful. And one of the things that we'd like to see is that the government, in fact, embrace it. I've made the comment before, perhaps a little tongue-in-cheek, that Nigeria should be the easiest country to manage because Nigerians are so able to self-organize. And if we can let that self-organizing force kind of be expressed throughout the country, I think we'd solve a lot of problems. But you are starting to see, for example, it's very clear in the last 5 years, there's a much deeper understanding that inclusive, sustainable economic development has to happen at the local and the state level. And you see lots of state governors really stepping up to drive this agenda. And so, sorry, just to continue on this, I think we're starting to see the turn. Of course, I was the one that coined the term poor in 2015, poor in 2016 per capita, poor in 2017, poor in 2018, poor in 2019. I've stopped repeating that. We all understand the bad news. But if you look at the most recent numbers from the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics, you think about what happened. The Nigerian economy grew 0.1% in 2020. Now, of course, it would be easy for me to stand up and say, yes, we got poorer per capita, which is true, but that's not actually the important point. The important point is that, South Africa shrunk 8%. If you had told us that we would grow 8% faster than South Africa, that is extraordinary performance. The UK shrunk 10% in 2020. So, we can start to see this turning, and it's turning because of self-organizing. It's turning because of state-level development. The diaspora issue is better understood. The ICT, the creative industries, those two. People may not realize. You keep thinking this is an oil economy, and I keep saying it's not an oil economy. ICT broadly and creative industries are over 20% of the economy, and these are things that Nigerians excel at. They export. So you're really starting to see, I think, the gathering force of a very successful Nigeria in the 2020s.
Well, I think globally, it's a given that economic recovery in the face of the pandemic will be uneven. And business growth is at the heart of that process. The EU is investing heavily in post-pandemic recovery. China is projecting growth of about over 6%, even in 2021. What should businesses and governments in Africa focus on, given the fact that they are already thrown into the middle of the ocean as a result of vaccine geopolitics?
Well, I think we should, in Nigeria and broadly in Africa, we should focus on what we've said for a long time, which is there are really two things that matter. One is education and two is healthcare. I mean, we invest the resources we have in Nigerians, young people in those two areas, we're going to be successful. And so, I mean, it was reported this morning that His Excellency Lagos Governor Sanwo-Olu had an event yesterday giving awards to meritorious teachers on that. That's an example of sort of let's put our resources around education. I mean, we've also brought the term to Nigeria brain capital, right? So we're saying it like at the end of the day, people have said this is an oil economy. It's actually not accurate. Our biggest source of foreign exchange is the diaspora. The diaspora remittances touch 1 out of 2 Nigerians, which is extraordinary. I mean, how much the oil wealth, how many Nigerians does the oil wealth really touch in a meaningful way? So, but what is the diaspora? The diaspora is an export of Nigerian brains. Now, now what we're saying is, let's celebrate this brain capital. It's not a brain drain. I mean, Her Excellency Chairwoman of NIDCOM, Mrs. Dabiri, came out and said it's a brain circulation on that. But the thing with the new world is we are more able to export brains without people leaving Nigeria. And that's what we think we should be focused on, which means, education and investing in Nigerian young people. But when I say export brains, it's already starting to happen. So you might have heard of this incredible company called Outsource Global, founded by remarkable Nigerian heroine Amal Hassan. So this is a company in northern Nigeria that has 1,000 employees that deliver high value-added services, business processing, outsourcing, call center services, high-end legal services to clients in the UK and the US. So she's got 1,000 employees earning foreign exchange for Nigeria, and they're sitting still in Nigeria. So they haven't left the country as part of this diaspora. So the diaspora is capitalizing on our brain capital, but we can continue to capitalize it while people remain in Nigeria. And it's happening everywhere. You've got Amal Hassan's company. You've got others that are doing the same thing. We are exporting financial services. So you might have seen recently that Nigeria's leading bank, Access Bank, bought part of a bank in South Africa, which is, you've got UBA on the march, InterSwitch on the march, Flutterwave. So we're exporting financial services. And of course, we're exporting Nollywood and cultural services too. I mean, when people saw there were 2 Grammy Award winners 2 weeks ago by Nigerians, which is fantastic. So our basic economic thesis for Nigeria certainly is we should be exporting brains, Nigerian brains. And sometimes those brains will leave the country, but that's brain circulation. And sometimes those brains will stay in the country, and that's absolutely fine too. But that's our economic strategy. Now, one reason this is critical is because there's a lot of discussion about AFCFTA and the export of manufactured goods, but people forget 70% of the global economy is actually services. And it is not really easy for Nigeria in the medium term to export physical goods. Why is that? We all understand the challenges of APAPA. We all understand the challenges of the infrastructure within the country, of the customs system, of the ports, the inland ports, et cetera. So, we're not competitive in manufacturing, but we're competitive in high value-added services. So let's focus on what we're competitive in and export that. That's what having a free trade agreement is all about. So, we would like, yes.
Dr. Nevin, let's take a quick break and then we'll come back to you and the conversation will continue. We'll be right back after this commercial. Welcome back to the morning show here on the Arise News channel. Our guest is still Dr. Andrew Nevin, partner and chief economist at PricewaterhouseCoopers Nigeria. Dr. Nevin, thank you very much for staying with us. Before we took that commercial break, you were talking about brain capital and Nigeria's competitive advantage. And now that can be used as part of the recovery process post-pandemic. If you may just conclude your thoughts.
No, thank you for that. And sorry for going on. I'm so passionate about it. But I mean, you go back to the structure of our economy. We're really right now at what I call a barbell economy. So we have 2 major exports. One is oil, which is the lowest value-added product on the planet, and the other is Nigerian brains, either staying in Nigeria or in the diaspora. So we look like a barbell economy. It makes the most sense from our perspective at PwC that we invest in what we're good at, which are the brains. So let's make it an uneven barbell economy. and make Nigeria the brain capital of the world. I mean, it's extraordinary. If you think about the diaspora, so you think about the Philippines, for example, as another major remittance country. And it's a wonderful country and very talented people. But the average Filipino who's working outside does not earn a high wage. In Nigeria, I mean, the Nigerian diaspora in the United States earns more than the average Nigerian. That is extraordinary for a relatively new diaspora group in the United States. And that's what we need to capitalize on. So whether we have the brain capital in Nigeria or whether it's brain circulation, as Chairwoman Dabiri says from NIDCOM, that's what we need to focus on. And I would like to see Nigeria as a national strategy stand up and say our national strategy is to optimize or maximize brain capital. Because if we optimize brain capital and we embrace self-organizing, I mean, good things are going to happen. But from a viewpoint of where to focus resources now, as we have said for a while, education and healthcare, those are the two things. So we've been critical, for example, of the fuel subsidy. We've been a little, critical, I'll be honest, critical about investing in, say, the refineries. The scarce resources that Nigeria has should be invested in Nigeria's extraordinary young people, and the country will prosper. The other thing I'd like to add is people may not realize this, but from a demographic viewpoint, the projection now is by the end of the century that Nigeria would be the world's second most populous country, which is extraordinary. Now, we might see a slowdown in birth rates, and maybe that won't happen, but we are a very large demographic weight country. And actually, we should be interacting a lot. I'll particularly cite India, right? Because India has many of the same characteristics as Nigeria. It's a big, messy democracy, large landmass, religious differences, tribal cleavages. And yet, in the last few decades, it's done extraordinarily well. Again, really having a brain capital strategy. So I think, we need to forge our own path in Nigeria, but we have a lot to learn with India, and we should be cooperating with India, because if we end up, as the second largest populous country, India will be the first. These two countries should be getting together and playing, I don't want to say a dominant role in the world. That's not what we need more of, but playing a significant role in the way the world moves forward. And on the self-organizing, the world has a lot to learn from Nigeria.
Well, you all know apologies about being passionate about Nigeria. It's actually refreshing and commendable. So thank you for not coming here to spread doom and gloom. Brain circulation rather than brain drain. That's a novel one for me, and I much prefer it. I'm going to be using it henceforth, and I'll quote you. But I have two things to say.
Oh, sorry, you can't quote me. I stole this from Chairwoman Dabiri.
Oh, you stole it. Then I'm stealing it from you then.
Credit to Chairwoman Dabiri. So.
It's a great term. I love it. Now, look at what the Philippines has been able to do. You just mentioned them. India had cornered the market, the BPO market, and now look at how the Philippines have sort of edged their way in. And you've talked about this possibility for Nigeria. How do we actually chart a strategy? Business and processing outsourcing. How do we actually chart a strategy? Because I see an opportunity here. We saw what happened with the pandemic, the lockdowns and what have you. A lot of economies all over the world are under great strain. Businesses are probably looking for cheaper labor, which we have in abundance. They're looking for skilled labor, which we also have in abundance. We're trainable. We don't have a language barrier. We don't have an awkward sort of time zone. There's a huge possibility here. How do we actually chart a strategy? And to go back to debt, you're not concerned about it. I am. Debt to GDP ratio is one thing, but look at debt servicing ratio. When we're spending 25 to 30% of our revenue servicing debts, that's a huge problem. What's the way out of that as well?
So let me begin with the second question first on the debt service. I mean, the way out is we need the economy to grow, right? And so all of the things that I'm talking about, I think will help the economy grow. And we obviously need to increase the tax take versus GDP. Now, the one thing that we've also said, though, is, I mean, the federal government is aware of this, but they need to be careful in terms of the social contract, if you will. I mean, you can't just describe a situation where people supply their own, let's call it the big five, so education, healthcare, security, infrastructure, and power. And then suddenly the government comes along and demands a tax take, and people are pushing back on that. So, there needs to be a little bit of a circular or synergy here where the government is giving more services, people perceive value for money, and then they can increase the tax take and the economy can grow, and we'll come out of it. I mean, if we have 1 or 2 years of 6 to 8% growth, which is the minimum we really need, and I think we're getting there. Very quickly see these headline numbers of how much of the revenue goes to interest payments, for example, come down very rapidly. So, I remain, as long as we remain focused on the fundamentals and unlocking dead assets, I really don't think that the debt issue should be significant. Of course, if we don't do the right things, it will become in the next 2, 3, 4 years a real problem. But on the BPO, again, we're the self-organizing nation. It's already happening. As I mentioned, Amal's company, Outsource Global, which is phenomenal. There are other companies coming up that are doing that. There's one foreign company that's come and put a lot of seats in Lagos Tech Experts. And you're exactly right. The pandemic has highlighted. We always had BPO the last 30 years, but it's really accelerated as people realize remote work is more and more feasible. And you're also getting, again, it's tribute to Nigerians. I'm hearing more and more about Nigerians that are getting hired abroad to do very high-end work, perhaps paid a European or U.S. They're certainly paid in U.S. or euros or pounds at the same level as people in those countries, and yet they're remaining in Nigeria. And that's happening at an individual level. So it's happening at an individual level. It's happening at a corporate level. Now, how can the government support it? Again, you don't have to do much. I would say the number one thing is really on the infrastructure side. So, if you're going to do good BPO support, if you're going to do good remote work, you need to have good connectivity at the end of the day. And of course, we've all been on many Zoom meetings, and sometimes in the Nigerian context, it's a bit challenging. We haven't had any technical problems today, but if the government could focus on getting the bandwidth, I think the Nigerians will take care of the rest for this. And I think it will be phenomenal, because I think we're going to find more and more jobs can be done remotely. And people don't necessarily want to leave Nigeria to earn a good salary. I think the other thing that needs to be highlighted, Rufai, is just Europe is going, the demographics in Europe are, maybe not dire, maybe it's good for the environment, but the working age population is shrinking across Europe. The total population is shrinking in some countries. They are going to need, people to do things there. And where are the people? They're Nigerians. So if we invest in brain capital in Nigeria, we're going to find ourselves in a very good position.
All right, great insight you shared, Andrew. And, concerning BPO, companies like Andela have led the way and getting great capital into this country. And it's just amazing what they're doing. Dr. Abati?
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Nevin, for joining us this morning. We thank you very much for your insight.